everybody, welcome back. This is the Invite Me In podcast. This is where experience and passion heal. This is Dr. Jocelyn Taylor,
Hello.
Brittany Taylor Brock,
Hey there.
and I'm Jonathan Brock. In this podcast, we are getting right to the point about something that is a plague and is toxic and is probably worse than ever in our society at all levels. And we're talking about the nasty awfulness of gossip. Is there any one of you that hasn't been affected by gossip in some way, shape, or form, or your loved ones, or maybe even you have been a gossiper? We want to talk about the responsibility that we have as humans to shut down and address toxic and abusive or unethical behavior in terms of a person's personal cultural framework. We have an obligation to do that. Today, we're going to talk about gossip because it's so pervasive.
Gossip. I love how you say that. Gossip. You make it sound so
Make it
evil.
sound, yeah,
It is
dark.
evil.
It is
Ugh.
evil. So as a reminder, we've been talking about culture as shiver bees. We have found that when people understand culture in this way, that they have highly favorable dispositions.
Yeah, they enjoy.
So
they,
we like it.
they enjoy relating to. Oh, these are parts of who I am. Yeah.
So I have a question though,
Sure.
which is kind of guiding where this podcast is going.
Let's go.
So what
Let's go.
happens when a person's shiver bee is fundamentally toxic? Like, for example, in their shiver bee, they have abuse as part of their household practice or
gossip.
or gossip
Yeah.
as we are leading into.
Yeah.
So this presents us with a moral and ethical dilemma. We have to now make a judgment on whether or not someone's shiver bee is ethical.
Well, making judgments is pretty scary
Yeah.
because you're the judge. Well, let me
Yeah.
give you an example. I have an example of institutional bullying.
Gossip.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
well, I said bullying.
Well, they're
but
the same thing.
Gossip and bullying is the same
They're
thing.
one and the same thing.
And
Mhm.
this was truly institutional, and it resulted in many people being hurt. I hired someone to be on my related services team, and my director at the time was not part of the interview, but I did get an email from her, and she said, "Looks like we got another bad one." I was very shocked about that. How would she know if this person was a bad one? She wasn't part of the interview process, and the interview process is highly confidential. We don't talk about that. So I went to her and I said, "Well, where did you get this information?" Well, she got it from a gossip chain. They had a meeting where the directors would go and meet and they would chat with each other. I felt like this was collusion. And one director said to my director, "Oh, I think you've hired this person from my school district. I wrote her up for a variety of reasons."
That's
And
awful.
so, yeah, it
Yeah,
was
That
yeah.
is so confidential.
And widespread at the same time.
Right. So I thought to myself, this is unethical. This is colluding at the highest level.
That is
They
gossip.
have no right to talk about people in that way. Their lives and their high, her reputation and her professional stance. You know what? And she turned out to be excellent. I just cannot imagine where that
Poetic, poetic justice.
The poetic justice. The person you hired ended up being
She-
exactly everything that the gossipers didn't believe.
Yeah, that
Wow.
was absolutely true.
Wow. But
We got to call out bad behavior.
That's what we're doing.
Right?
We
That's
are.
That's what we're doing.
And that was bad behavior.
that is
Okay.
bad behavior.
Okay.
I do suspect, though, that chronic gossip can have a toxic effect on every single one of the shiver bees.
Yes, every single part of our what makes us a person. It is. I can see how gossip can negatively affect, for example, the interaction styles that we have among each other. Families, administrative settings, work. Again, pick a place, pick a time. Anywhere there's two or more people together, gossip can be pervasive. I could think of an example too that has been devastating to me over my life. I mean, I've been gossiped about here and there and everywhere. There's probably people watching who are kind of like sweating right now because that's who I'm talking to. But we're calling gossip out because it's awful, and we're going to give you some tools later in this discussion about how to actually address it in an effective way. For me, being in a professional setting a lot of my life, gossip happens in the form in organizations, even in families, of people coalesce together, they become a coalition behind the scenes, and then gossip becomes this underground network of stuff, and it's the interaction style of a person's shiver bee that gets all messed up because that's not a healthy interaction. So the whole idea of coalitioning
No,
and people
especially when
forming
they gossip
teams.
about
It's like
people
the
who are
seedy
close to them,
underground.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Gossip is the opposite of collaboration.
So who do they gossip about?
Uh, Whoever threatens them, whoever they're jealous of, whoever they disagree with, or kind of like with bullying, they gossip about people who they need to have
And I
control
also
over.
think gossip is a way to deflect from their own
Yeah,
shortcomings.
yeah. Gossip
Well,
is
I can
founded
see
in
people
shame.
coming home and gossiping,
Mm.
gossiping about the coach, or
Yes.
gossiping about that church leader,
Or an
The-
an ex-spouse
Uh,
or someone
yeah,
they
you know
disagree
what?
with.
the-
That's very
That's
dangerous.
the thing. And before
Yeah.
long,
You-
you have that happening in the household practice, right? They come home and they're gossiping about these different things. So now you can see how that becomes a part of the belief system of the people in that
Absolutely.
household.
Oh my
And
gosh, yes.
and it's part of the interaction.
It is.
And then it becomes what they value.
Yeah,
Gossip and toxicity is
yeah.
what they value.
That's right.
That's disgusting.
If any,
I can't even.
no, if any one of our human family who we're talking, they're still our family. We love them. We're a family, but it's behavior we're judging.
Yeah.
If you think about Shiverby, a household practice, that's the H, right? If you grew up in your household, learning that gossip is an accepted value and an accepted
That's
practice,
the V for value.
that's exactly right. It's hard to pin down a person who's doing it because we need to go to the source of it too.
Hmm.
And in Shiverby, like we learned, there are toxic, abusive behaviors, and gossip is one of the worst. Hmm. So, for me, I think
No, I
about
just wanted
yeah,
to go back just
sure,
briefly
please.
to gossiping about
Uh-huh.
the ex-spouse. I have some pretty passionate feelings about that, particularly from my child development perspective.
Sure.
When ex-spouses are gossiped about, the children end up being bullets. Have you
Mm.
seen what happens to a bullet when it's fired?
It just destroys and
And
falls to
what
the ground,
happens
doesn't it?
to, yeah,
Yeah.
what happens to everything around the bullet?
Collateral damage.
Yeah, damage.
Yeah.
Everyone is damaged. So
Everyone's
that's
damaged.
just my little thing about exes. If you are an ex, don't talk about your spouse
No.
in a negative way,
Yeah.
because you may have children
Mhm.
and they need to hear good things about their parent.
Amen.
If
So
you-
that's just my thing about that. I'm not an ex.
That's your high horse. I
but-
love it.
Oh,
No,
On your
it's good,
soapbox,
yeah.
I'm happy. You
Well,
bring
okay.
that on.
Well,
You
all
take
right,
it on.
all right.
I
Thank
It's a
love
you.
real
it.
life example is what it is.
Yeah.
And then thinking again about like Shiverby, our Shiverby model, the spirituality aspect. Gossip messes with spirituality because it disrupts a person's sense of belonging and connectedness to the world. When they get gossiped about, it wears away, erodes at
Well-
their self-worth and
Their dignity.
their connection with the world. Their
Yeah.
dignity's gone.
Well, and
Yeah.
then I'm going to say in religion as well. I would imagine that every person on the planet has received some religious counsel. I mean, the United States is mostly Christian. I would bet that every Christian organization has taught that gossip is wrong. I
Mhm.
mean, we've heard of all of the analogies, the feathers that get dispersed and you
Spread it
can
and
never
can't
collect
find
them
them
back.
again. Yeah.
So I think that we've just made the point that gossip has a negative effect on all of the Shiverbees.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely does.
But here's the thing too with gossip. It's become extremely sophisticated, and you can actually see clues in an individual. If you know what to look for, you can see you know if you need to protect yourself. I've had an experience like that recently with someone that I was assigned to work with contractually. And as soon as I met this person started saying things because we needed to pass information back and forth to each other regarding students. And this person immediately started going a little too far and started saying, oh, yeah, the people in their ward, they say this about this kid and that about that
So
kid.
that
And I
was
kind
in
of
a
thought, that
profession-
feels off.
But the point is
But the
there.
point
It
is,
happens in
it
our everyday
happens,
life.
and it's very sophisticated.
that
It's
was
very
both-
underground.
That was both unethical
Mhm.
and immoral.
Hmm.
So what's
Both.
so with that, both with ethics and morals, we made a claim earlier that every one of us has an obligation, an ethical obligation at the bare minimum, to shut down toxic behavior that might be a part of a person's value system, household practice, the way they interact, their upbringing, their personal culture. So what do we do with that? How do we help our audience negotiate this idea of applying ethics and having a process to approach gossip? Because
Well,
people don't want to talk about gossip, right?
I think
We avoid it.
we need to know the difference between ethics and morals.
Would you share that with us?
Well, yeah. Okay. So they both suggest right and wrong behavior. Ethics is what's written and what comes from the outside to us, like a handbook, like rules. Morals is generated from within us. And they're morals, they're behaviors that we can universally accept.
Yeah.
Like everyone on the planet, morally, they deserve freedom. They deserve clean drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So I, just the speech path in me, I like to know the difference between ethics and morals.
Mm-hmm. Ethics are like
So
they're,
now
they're
you were asking the question is how do we judge
how do,
I
if
know.
they're
how do we?
There's a model that we can use to judge. There's a strategy here.
We're talking about a model that we can use to judge
to make a decision?
to
Mhm.
approach a toxic behavior like gossip.
Yes.
And okay, let's hear
It's,
about
ca-
it.
So
it's
you're
called
saying-
it's called the COI or COI model. Consequences, obligations, and ideals.
And it's an ethical approach. It's
Yes.
ethics. It's
Yep.
ethics based. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. So if
yeah.
you consider the consequences, what are the consequences of gossip?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
reputations are destroyed, people are hurt, lies are spread.
Self-worth is
And
damaged.
the person who is gossiping, they don't know, but they are actually destroying their own
Mhm.
reputation because the listener is thinking, oh, you say these things about this person. What on earth are you saying about me?
Okay.
Right.
So,
And
consequences.
yeah, absolutely. Now think
Yeah.
about the obligations. So what obligations do parents have, or do educators have, or do CEOs have?
Mhm.
What are the obligations we have?
Well, as parents, you have the obligation to model correct behavior. As a human, you have an obligation to do no harm. You have an obligation to tell the truth. Um,
I would add we have an obligation to root out any kind of gossip that our children and our family are getting involved in. We need to root it out and strike it right
and that
there.
may be harmful.
Absolutely.
Because the general,
Yeah.
do no harm is a general model for
Mhm.
most of the people on the planet.
Yeah, okay,
So
right
you
there
said-
it teaches us the ideal. What is the ideal? That we do no harm,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The
that's a
right?
point.
That can, yes,
Yeah.
and there's the
that's-
I in the as ideals. So we do no harm, and nobody wants to have that misinformation or damaging or slander, anything
Mhm.
miscommunicated about them, right?
No, absolutely.
So now that's the ideal that we consider
Okay.
is
Okay.
Absolutely.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what you're saying is we use the COI model.
Yes.
COI.
COI.
Yes.
COI, to make a judgment about whether something is unethical
Mhm.
or immoral.
Hmm.
I think that gives us some clout. It gives us a framework of thinking clearly.
It does with that framework too, folks that are listening. Reiterating ethics and morals. Ethics come from an outward source, like
Mhm.
policymakers or law. There are things that outwardly influence us. So we would make a decision ethically based on an outward force. Things that
Can I
change.
tell a brief story?
Sure.
It's just cute. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
When you say ethical and moral, my mother, she has passed away, but she did pass away when she was about 100 years old. She was the epitome of ethics and morals, never doing anything wrong.
Of course she
Oh,
was.
Lula, I just bless her. But one day she was driving along and I was a passenger in her car, and she did not respond to the red light as quickly as she needed to.
Mhm.
That's
So
a
she-
nice way of saying it.
She,
That she ran the red light.
Yeah.
she didn't run it.
Why say run
She-
the red light when you can?
Hang on.
No, this is
She
great.
got into the middle of the intersection and she said, oh, it's a red light. So she stopped
Mhm.
and then she backed up and then she waited right there for the light to change.
Yeah.
So that's an example of her following the law, but yet she could have put someone in mortal danger. So while her ethics were kicking in,
Yeah.
the morals of what might have happened might have been dire.
Mm.
So that's an example of a dilemma.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Thank you for letting me.
The other half of that is the moral side.
I don't know. I see Brittany's.
I just
What's on your
You look
mind?
suspicious,
What's on your
Brittany.
mind? What is
She
it?
looks really suspicious.
I can't help it. My squirrel brain went straight to how does this apply to Bigfoot argument.
Well, of course.
My mind is wondering, what in the world does this have to do with Bigfoot?
No, I
Well-
know that your mind was wondering, of course, Brittany. Yes, this makes perfect sense.
We can't gossip about.
As you know, we have an ongoing dispute about the legitimacy of Bigfoot, so we'll apply the Coy model with Bigfoot. I have the consequence of believing in it is you're believing in false things.
No, no, no.
The obligation I
What?
have is to shut down
You just shattered my world.
questionable and unprovable stuff, and the idea would
Unprovable.
yeah, that's a real word.
Okay, you know what? Let me just say this.
Yeah.
Our human bodies are the most advanced scientific instruments in existence. Okay.
Right.
So if I feel it, see it, smell it, perceive it, it's real.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't need to have some amateur footage on YouTube.
People
If
said
I
this-
feel it,
no.
see it, smell it, sense it, whatever.
People say the same
It's
thing
real.
about their dreams, but whatever. We digress.
Okay.
we do.
Continue.
We were
do
tying a
digress.
connection with ethics and morals, and the moral part is they come from an inward place, almost based on the
Yeah.
soul, and we base behavior on what our moral beliefs are. They're inward. Ethics are intrinsic and outward and can be changed.
Mhm.
Morals really are kind of solid. So we have this ethics and morals piece that we have a responsibility to think about when we're addressing gossip.
So at this
Okay.
point, I want to refer you to the visual that will be on the screen. You will see on the left-hand column, we have consequences. You will see in the middle column, we have obligations. And you will see on the right-hand column, we have ideals. And then across the bottom, you apply all of those and make decisions based on ethics and morals.
Mhm.
This is a nice little visual. I invite you to download it and print it. And then you have sound thinking for making judgments about shiver bees.
And a reminder of why we're doing that is we want you to have something to use when you do actually address gossip. People avoid it like the plague because why? We don't know how to address it. It's so rampant. We're talking about an ethical approach, about ethics and morals, consequences, obligations, ideals. We all have to consider all three if we're actually going to start tackling gossip. So how do we take consequences, obligations, ideals, ethics, morals, and how do we actually approach someone in real life? It's easier said than done. How do we take this and approach somebody and say, hey, what you're doing is abusive, it's toxic, and it's unethical, and it might even be immoral. Where's that discussion start?
And you can add, because this is the consequences of what you're doing, and you have an obligation, and no one on the planet wants to
And
be
we have an
treated like
ideal.
this.
Sure. We
Well,
have an
that's the
ideal.
no one
Yeah.
on the planet wants
Right,
to be
yeah.
treated like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that we've covered all of our topics.
I think we have. But
So let's
yeah.
wrap this up.
I love it. I love it. Brittany, is there anything else you want to say before we kind of summarize and drive everything home?
Of course there is.
Okay.
And that is Bigfoot is real.
Yes.
And that is all.
The
She has the
consequences.
last word.
The consequences.
Move it on.
Daily.
Moving it along.
Bigfoot.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. We
It's that
love it.
squirrel brain of
Oh,
mine.
no, it's fine. It's fine. Folks, we want you to really grasp the reality that not only is gossip awful and it's networked and it's destructive on every level, a marriage, a family, the post office, a church congregation, a church organization, wherever there's two people in an environment, there's a potential for gossip. So what are our main points? We have ways to approach it. We have tools to give you where you can actually say, hey, I don't like this and I'm brave and I want to talk to you about it. And again, for us, it's Shiverby. It's being invited in or inviting someone else in to create some common understanding. A lot of gossip happens because of misunderstandings or people don't know the other person. They create judgments and gossip harm. But really gossip comes from shame and a need for control, just like bullying does. So with that, we have these tools. So think about it, guys. Think about it. You have the consequences, the obligations, and the ideals that are applied to any situation with gossip. Ethics are they're generated from the outside, like we talked about. Morals are generated from the inside. Consequences are what happens after a right or wrong behavior. And we can use a consequence of a behavior to actually judge that. Does that make sense? Obligation. It's a duty or binding agreement that's been made, and we can use the obligations we have as humans to create a good environment as a way to judge. Ideals. It's a perfect example of what something should be. And in this case, the
Yeah.
ideal would be is that people don't gossip. They don't put someone
That
else's
would be an
reputation.
ideal.
It would be
Wouldn't that be
absolutely ideal.
nice to be in a world with no gossip?
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
So that is a lofty ideal.
So-
Sorry, I didn't
Oh,
mean
no,
to.
I'm glad you brought that up. Just in closing, a simple tool could be just like this. You approach the person through the invite me in mindset of, I want to be invited and understand why you gossip. Can you tell me why you said this about
And why
me?
that's a part of your shiver bee.
Why is that a part of your life?
Mhm.
Keeping in mind that gossip comes from things like household practices that people learned. It's how they've learned to interact with people, usually modeled by others, and it's part of their value system. So you approach them through the shiver bee, invite me in, and then you talk about here's the consequences, obligations, and the ideals associated with your decisions to gossip.
And that's how
Absolutely.
you can judge. That's how you can
You can
judge
make a judgment about
right and wrong behavior.
toxic, abusive behavior
Okay.
if it exists.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys for sharing that.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. We want to remind you that if you have been a victim of gossip or are currently, or if you're a gossiper, there's hope. And the first word is stop. Simple
And then
plain.
you punch them out. No.
We're trying to get away from that.
Okay.
Yeah, back in the old days, maybe. We are the experts in education. This is the Invite Me In podcast show, and this is where experience and passion heal. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.